You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is my lovely wife,
Jamie,
and my good pal,
Simon. Hello.
Hey man, welcome back. You must be really excited to be doing this since everybody thinks you're Australian.
That's very true. That's a good point. And I also thought last night it kind of links up with kind of creatures that eat people.
Yeah, that's
true.
And live in water.
That
So,
counts.
Just about. It's a stretch, but it's just about there.
That are in water. Mm-hmm.
That's right. We are covering the 1986 film Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
And did you see this one in the theater? Was it a hit in the UK?
Oh, yeah. It was. So I saw this on a cross-channel ferry going to Belgium, weirdly. My parents would go to Belgium occasionally for I think kind of like a booze break. I think it was a chance for them to sit in a bar and just do nothing. Because when we got to Belgium, we literally walked around. And I feel like it felt like about 7 a.m. for about 2 hours, and the only thing open was a bakery. And then we got back on the ferry and came back. So I'm like, I think the point of it was just to sit in a bar on a ferry all weekend, and not worry about kids. And my brother was small enough that he kind of stayed with them, when they kind of were drinking and eating. But I was a teenager, so I was obviously bored. So I ended up seeing a lot of films because every ferry had some kind of entertainment center. So I saw, and they were different kind of quality. Some of them were pretty much just an expanded front room. But for Crocodile Dundee, there was a proper cinema on that particular ferry.
Oh,
and that film had just come out. So I was very excited. And I was also excited because it was a 15 certificate. And I would have been 12. So I got in to see it. And I remember trying to open my candy at the start and splitting the bag and them going everywhere. And then all the adults around me helping me pick them up. So I missed the first 10 minutes of the film.
I've had that happen before.
Yeah,
And I just let them go because they rolled down the theater.
And these were basically the English version of Whoppers, so they did roll real fast. But I
hope you didn't eat them.
I probably did, but
he's still here. He's fine.
Yeah.
I'm okay. But it made me stronger. What didn't kill me made me stronger.
In the spirit of Crocodile Dundee.
In the spirit of Crocodile Dundee and Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely the best film I've seen on ferry because I also saw Short Circuit and Police Academy 4 at other times, and weirdly Chisholm with John Wayne, which must have been a very lowbrow ferry because they just kept showing Chisholm on a loop. But yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and then I went back and told my parents, and they were like, "Oh, well, great." And then about 4 years later, it was probably on BBC on Christmas Day. I actually looked up last night, and it said it's still the most watched film or TV program ever at Christmas for Christmas Day, because about 25 million watched it in 1989.
Oh
I
my
guess.
God.
Wow.
But also highest Australian film ever, um, highest film in Australia ever, and highest Australian film in the States ever. Second biggest film in 1986. I'm guessing the first one was Top Gun, maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
probably.
but yeah, but huge hit. Basically, budget was 8.8 million. It made 328 million.
I just did a
Wow.
conversion, an inflation calculator, and that is approximately 913 million in today's dollars. So it almost did like $1 billion.
One, like, do Dr. Evil, $1 billion.
$1 billion. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. I know I saw it. We were on a family vacation in Missouri. My grandfather used to live there, and he doesn't live there anymore because he's no longer alive. I'm
Yeah,
not laughing that he died. Um,
he lays there now.
but we went to the four of us basically took a Sunday afternoon while we were staying with my grandfather to go see it, and saw it with a theater full of people in the wilds of Missouri.
Ah,
And I think it was one of the movies that made my mom believe that taking the whole family to go see a movie together was an inherently good idea, which it never really was. All four
yeah,
of us liked that movie. It kind of hit the four quadrant thing of, old, young, male, female.
yeah,
But and then it was on cable and whatever. I watched this movie over and over for quite a while, but I probably have not seen it again. I know I've watched it in the past 20 years, but couldn't tell you when or where.
yeah. It's definitely, yeah, like you say, it's kind of fixed with me as a family film, probably because we all watched it at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like those films I watched Christmas Day night with my family, which I can reel them off. I can, like, Raiders of the Lost Ark was one year, Ghostbusters was another year, Fish Called Wanda was another year. And it was like, yeah, they kind of stick in the memory because I guess it is all your family sitting around having a good time, laughing away, kind of bonding, I guess.
Yeah, and in the classic tradition, there's definitely some things that maybe you didn't want to see in the movie sitting next to you.
Yeah.
But whatever. Jamie,
Well, I was reading like customer reviews last night, and it's funny because some people were like, "It's a great comedy," and other people were like, "It's the most sexist, racist, transphobic film I've ever seen. I'm 20 years old, and I'm upset by everything." And I was like, I can kind of see that. I can
Oh,
kind
I
of
can
see it.
absolutely see it. But it was made in the 80s.
yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, totally. I mean, you got to like put it in context.
Jamie, did you see it on HBO, or did your family roll out to the?
I don't remember the specifics of seeing it the first time. We certainly saw it in the theater and everyone enjoyed it. But then, like you said, Ryan, it was on HBO like
All
all
the time.
the time. So that's really what I remember is just anytime it was on TV, I knew it was a movie that I enjoyed, so I just kept watching. Um, and I mean, you say we probably saw it in the past 20 years. I believe you. I don't really have a good recollection of that, so I don't know. Watching it again, um, you can definitely feel the years on it.
Yeah, I totally
It's a
agree with that.
different experience watching it now. Um, and I can't say that I enjoy it as much as I did when I was a kid, but it's
It's
still
got a
definitely
charm.
watchable. It's charming.
Yeah,
I mean, you can see why it was made. I mean, Paul Hogan is charming, but I think this is like his only role, really. I mean, this is what
yeah.
he does.
He could never
Um,
really break out of this because
there's
I think
no
he tried.
range. Yeah,
I
yeah.
know they
Paul
tried to
Hogan
push him.
himself is an interesting figure in all of this, because he, as a young guy, he was like basically, I believe, worked on like the Sydney Bridge. Like that was his
Mhm.
job. And there was some show on in Sydney that was like kind of a talent competition, and basically the judges made fun of the contestants. And he showed up and was like, well, the thing to do is to make fun of the judges. And so he said he was coming on to do some other talent. But he really just made fun of the judges. And they're like, oh, that's brilliant. Let's bring him back. And so he kind of became a fixture on the show. And then he ended up getting his own show in Australia on one of their networks. And then he became the face of Australian tourism, which I have no memory of pre-Crocodile Dundee. I didn't remember the commercials. I do remember them doing them after the movie, but he's apparently ground zero for put another shrimp on the Barbie. Apparently that was part of the thing. So
I remember Foster's adverts, which were around the same time as Crocodile Dundee. But like you say, I'm not quite sure if they were before or after.
I do remember the Fosters, yeah, but I don't remember him being a part of that specifically.
Because he'd go to kind of like, there'd be him at the ballet with a girl, and then he'd go, blimey, that guy's wearing no, he hasn't got any strides on. And he's like, I better have a beer. And then he'd get a Foster's and stuff. So he was like the real Aussie guy. It was like a dry run for this, really, for the film,
Yeah, from what I read, it sounds like he was really kind of workshopping the idea. But yeah, I mean, he ended up then writing this movie. So like we said, it was like worth basically in inflated dollars, about $1 billion. And he owned a huge chunk of that.
It's almost self-financed because, I mean, he shopped it around and I think he got his TV producers from his show to kind of help him kind of push it. And he tried it everywhere until finally Paramount bought it for like $6 million or something. But I mean, I'm sure he had, percentage points and, all that kind of stuff. So he probably made a ton of money off this.
I'm 100% certain he must have. I mean, partially because he tried the whole Hollywood thing afterward. He's definitely done things, but it didn't really blow up. And of course, his co-star, he ended up running away from his wife and marrying Linda because so
you could say it was like a kind of like a film affair, but it lasted 23 years. That's not
it lasted a long time. It lasted through the sequels. So
yeah, I always think of her as kind of like a C-list kind of Sharon Stone or Kim Cattrall.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah.
Because this is the only thing she's done as well.
Well,
it's funny because when she divorced him about 6 years ago, she was like, now I can start acting. I'm like, left that a bit late now, really. So,
I just looked at her IMDb page because Ryan and I were talking, and he said she did a few other things. And maybe she's just been like doing stage since, but the last thing she has listed is the third one of these. Which
is like 20 years ago now, isn't it?
It was 2001.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never seen that movie, by the way.
You don't miss him.
I'm curious, but I also know it's terrible. So I'm not that curious.
Yeah. Yeah, the second one's not bad.
The second one is terrible, Simon. It's so bad. Well, I'm trying to watch it again. It's painful.
It's kind of like Jaws 2. It's like, more the same, but not as good, basically. Yeah.
Well, the problem that I have with the second one, and I don't know why we haven't even talked about the first one yet, but like the whole charm of this one is like you get her being fish out of water for half of it and him being fish out of water for half of it.
Yeah.
And in the sequel, it's like, well, he's been living in New York for however many years and he's still like sleeping on the floor and like hanging up his clothes in the clothesline. I don't know. It just didn't work for me, but we're not talking about that movie.
That's true. Yeah, I will say this before we go on to this, though. What I liked about the second one was he reversed it. It started off in New York, and then it finishes in Australia for the second half, because he's being chased by the villains.
Right.
So it's kind of like, but it's like, it's funny. It's funny how in this, the whole point of this film is him going to New York. And pretty much every other franchise in the 80s, that's what the sequel would do. So like Short Circuit, it's like
it's like whatever the title : Lost in New York or
it's like we're gonna make a sequel. Okay, let's go to
New York Nights or whatever. Yeah.
But this
You're
one
right.
was straight there.
And to your point, the U.S. wasn't. This movie was kind of the catalyst for the obsession with Australia, but definitely like if you growing up in the suburbs in the U.S. at the time, had it pounded into your head how exciting and great New York was, which was interesting because New York was not doing great coming out of the 70s.
Oh, shit.
There was definitely the Wall Street thing and and all of that. But it was highly, highly romanticized at that time that you would leave Kansas or wherever you were and you Michael J. Fox.
Yes.
Go there.
Yeah. I was literally just thinking that.
Secret of my success, fame, all the fame stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna make it big.
Yeah, and that the idea was you're going to realize your own personal amazingness like by going to the big city and being discovered. And I imagine that sailed 1,000 ships. It was.
Well, it's almost like going back to the Irish come to Ellis Island. It's almost like still carrying on that. Like, we're going to make a brighter future for ourselves here, and
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of remember what the 80s. I mean, there was so much in New York at the time too. I mean, anything like all broadcasts were coming out of New York, and
Saturday Night Live still.
Live was still there. You had that, and you had LA, and LA never seemed as appealing. LA seemed like a place that was kind of pitched as this is where you go if you want to go be a movie star, but it's kind of more wacky and more daffy.
Well, it's almost like LA Story is kind of Steve Martin is like LA, whereas like New York is kind of Ghostbusters and all that kind of stuff, and it's like kind of like almost like working class, but like you say, if you work hard enough and get the right break, you can make it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much the US really had a concept of Australia prior to this movie. I don't remember people really talking. I mean, we're all aware it was there, but I remember my fourth grade math teacher who I would have I think the next year would have been when the movie came out. He was already obsessed with Australia, so he would talk about like didgeridoo. He had a didgeridoo and all this stuff. So, but yeah, it's in ever since this is left a major impression, and it's kind of funny because it's not like Australia doesn't also have major cities and doesn't, it puts out major entertainers that hit the whole planet.
Well, this was apparently like Paul Hogan purposely, because, I guess like film wise, the Australian Renaissance began going on since the late 70s, mid 70s. So you'd have stuff like Mad Max and Mad Max 2. But this was, he purposely said, I sat down and tried to write what would work in America, like a Hollywood movie, and I think, I think he really succeeded. I mean, it's, and he also said, he wanted to create almost like an Australian folk hero because we didn't really have a folk hero, like the English had Robin Hood and whatever. The ones we had were like Ned Kelly. They weren't that good. They were kind of crap.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I think in the American psyche, I mean, to anyone of a certain age, I don't know about people who are in their 20s or whatever who they think is coming out, probably Nicole Kidman or something, but he may be Hugh Jackman, but he was by far the most famous Australian overnight.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
he was kind of massive. I mean, I remember.
Hey, let's not forget about Yahoo Serious.
It's very true.
You're correct.
Skippy.
Corrected.
That's Skippy.
Sorry, Yahoo Serious fans.
Well, I remember, I think I must have been the year after this, I guess, Paul Hogan hosted one of the awards of the Oscars. And I remember he did a fantastic little routine. Like, if he's watching on YouTube, it's hilarious, where he's kind of mocking, the audience, but also saying, well, I'm one of you now and stuff. And it kind of cuts to Dustin Hoffman, like, giving him daggers. Because he's probably like, he's just a comedian. But it's like, but yeah, I mean, he got massive really fast. And pretty much stayed there for a couple of years, on the back of this and the sequel,
Yeah, I mean, the sequel did very well as well. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I always forget that it starts it does start in New York for about 3 seconds to at least establish, this New York, but this person has left New York, the confines of what and the big city gal.
You expected a Trump cameo, which thankfully we don't get.
I hadn't thought about that, and this would have been that era. It would have been exactly when he started thinking that was a great idea. But yeah, and so you get I can't even, Sue Charlton. I guess they said her name numerous times, but yeah, you get Sue, who's played by Linda Kozlowski, who had pretty much, I guess, come from the stage. She's very young here. I always thought she was in her like early 30s. She's actually like 27 here.
You're also wearing the most 80s clothes imaginable the whole film.
Jamie, you said you wanted to talk a bit about Linda Kozlowski / Sue Charlton. I'm gonna go ahead and let you do that.
Well, I think you did sway me a little bit because you said, oh, she'd been to Juilliard and stuff, and I don't know of. I can't speak on her range because this is the only movie I have seen her in.
Very small, very small.
But
smaller than Paul Hogan.
I don't necessarily really care for her character very much. I think she definitely has screen presence, and
Jamie,
I help.
She's got a thong.
We're getting there. We're getting there, Simon. She has screen presence, and it helps tremendously that she has a really good chemistry with him. That is what makes this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, they had an affair or not, it worked for the film. So, whatever. But she does some stuff that I'm just kind of like, she leads him on. She's deliberately dating. I mean, a guy from New York knows she's dating him.
Yeah.
And then smooches Paul Hogan Mick. It says, hey, come back to New York with me. I mean, if that's not an invite, I don't know what is. And then when they get back to New York, she continues to go on dates with the three of them and do this stuff right in front of his face. I don't know. Maybe
I was a bit more charitable, I think, because I kind of went, she probably shouldn't have kissed him, but then he did save her life. And I think once she gets back, she's not really leading him on. She's more just A, doing the story, and B, I think just a bit torn herself. She's not sure about her own feelings, which I think is what leads up to the run in the last 10 minutes, really.
I mean, yes, I agree that she is torn between, her feelings. But you still don't invite a third person out on a date with someone you haven't seen in 3 weeks.
Paul Hogan does say that, though, doesn't he? He kind of says,
He does, but I'm saying he's correct.
Yeah, but I think she's he's a kind of guest. So
yeah,
I don't think it's so much she's rubbing his nose in it. I
don't think she's doing it to make him feel bad. I'm questioning why I don't know.
I will say this. It is a very, if you watch old 30s movies where it's whoever, Irene Dunn or whomever. And there's, they get stuck between their rich boyfriend and the working class guy who you're rooting for. It's a classic formula. It just happens to involve intercontinental travel.
I think that's my problem.
Yeah.
It's to me a loaded question when she says, come back to New York with me, because she wouldn't be asking him to come if she didn't genuinely like him. I feel like if it had just been the story, either that or she should have made it clear to him. I don't know. I don't know.
I think initially it was the story. I think she was like, wow, you've never been to a city? Well, a great kind of closure for this would be you come to New York and we finish off with, what do you think of New York? But then I think that's becoming clouded with other emotional things that are going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of I mean, I see your point, but I
Okay.
didn't.
So, aside from all that, let's talk about her wardrobe.
It's really bad.
Um, I
It's kind of great as well, actually.
her
Partially.
her side boob should have gotten a credit in this, its own credit, because wow. As a 11-year-old watching this when I was a kid, I was like, huh. Never seen that outfit choice on a woman before. And I'm
Is that
sorry, but if you were hiking in the outback, I don't care how damn hot it is, you are not wearing a thong.
well, it's funny. I was watching it last night. I kept thinking mosquitoes,
Oh
actually.
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, she's got a lot of flesh on display.
Oh, uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I'm
I don't
like,
care how hot it is, you're gonna be eaten alive.
yeah, because Paul Hogan's kind of dressed like, like properly, but I feel like
Right.
she just keeps stripping off all the
Yeah.
time.
I know. Well, then even in like when they're in that club, or not that club, the party that's in the middle of the day, this fancy like cocaine party in New York.
Oh yeah.
Um, she's the dress that she's got on there is like, okay, here's my entire side. And I don't want to like dress shame someone, but it was just, as an 11-year-old seeing it for the first time, I was seeing some outfits that I was new to.
I mean
Away from these
that
bras.
dress,
Linda Kozlowski hates these bras.
that dress, funnily, I think had more of an impact because I think like I can't speak for Ryan, but personally for most guys, I think you don't really get past the thong scene in this film. But so that dress later is like, a smaller tidal wave after the big one. But it's like, but I remember like years later, about 5 years after this, Liz Hurley wearing that dress to some premiere.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah, I vaguely remember something about that. Yeah.
maybe it was for Four Weddings, the premiere. And like,
Uh-huh.
and everybody was like, oh my God, that dress, because she's gorgeous as well, obviously. So yeah, so I was kind of impressed that Linda kind of got in there first, but you don't see enough of it. I think at that party to really register so much. There's little
Yeah.
glimpses.
Speak for yourself, but I mean, I'll be straight up with Jamie on the podcast. Like that thong left an indelible impression on me as an 11.
Very true.
I
That was before pornography.
yeah.
That was a videotape moment I kept watching.
Hey, I hear you guys. It's a movie. I just was like, as a lady going like, God damn, that looks uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but I
What was
also
it? It was a swimsuit though, wasn't it? It was just kind of cut pretty,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
what
pretty tight.
my memory of it was kind of going, oh, that's why people talk about butts. Like
Uh, big,
you
big
thought that was kind of weird until that point. And I'm like, okay, this is
Oh,
peeking in.
all right.
All right.
Yeah.
I will say, watching it yesterday though, that crocodile looked horribly false. The one
Oh,
that grabs
yeah.
her.
Oh, so
I
bad.
mean, I could make a better crocodile than
I kind of was I was a little bit I was laughing a little bit. I really was at that scene because it was so fakey.
that.
But yeah,
I
it
mean, going
was
back to what you were saying though, I think the chemistry of this, because it's a very simple premise,
very simple.
and to be honest, watching it, a lot of the jokes aren't that funny.
Yeah.
But I think because you get one almost every minute, it's like it's kind of like fall down effect kind of builds a bit of momentum. But it's mainly just trading off of their chemistry, which I think especially so for me, it's obviously very dated, but I love the first half and I love the last 10 minutes. All her trying to get to the subway and stuff. The bit that kind of like I left me a little bit cold this time was all the New York stuff because I'm like, oh, he doesn't know what an escalator is. He doesn't
Right.
know what an elevator is. He doesn't know what a bidet is. And I'm like, it's like this guy's been locked in a cupboard for like 50 years. I mean,
Oh,
he's obviously
by the way, Ryan and I looked at each other when the bidet scene came on, and we both agreed that's the first time we had ever heard of a bidet.
Yeah.
oh wow, yeah, me too, actually. Me too. At the
So
time.
they were treating it like, oh, you like
Yeah. You should know what this is.
I was
yokel. I mean, I
I was
didn't know what that was.
35 before I was in a place that had one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not a thing in the States. So it was kind of a weird, I mean, I don't want to get hung up for and spend 10 minutes on it, but it was a weird cultural touchstone. I did understand also there's a massive class thing they're doing here. And I was like, okay, I guess rich people wash their asses with water. I didn't, good to know.
Yeah.
Aim for that, I guess. But yeah, the stuff in New York is the stuff that people are more sensitive about because it's
There's also some weird stuff, like a bald guy walks past him and he kind of laughs at him. And it's like, you don't have bald guys in the
well,
where you come from?
well, I will say this well, yeah, I don't know about all that, but being bald was not cool till Picard.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's true. What about Kojak?
I mean, there's a reason that like guys were doing comb overs.
Yeah.
Plugs, all that stuff.
No, you're Brenner.
Toupees and hair club for men.
The guys who were bald, I mean, that was almost like I mean, it was their trademark sort of thing, and I would say Picard kind of made it just like, this is a totally normal thing because you're seeing them on TV week over week. I can't speak because I wasn't young enough for Kojak, but I can tell you, dads in my friends' dads had horrible comb overs and were making terrible decisions to try and it was a running joke about like getting bald, and I was terrified of it as a kid, and like Picard made it like totally normal and fine, and now dudes shave their heads who have hair.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know I do.
But the movie has this interesting setup to me of not only is it old school in the kind of like, the tradition of like the working class guy versus the rich guy. And of course, the socialite girl is going to go for the working class guy because it's a classic kind of movie.
Because that's how movies work.
But it also sets it up to where she is just swooning over all of his masculine stuff that clearly we're throwing that against.
That's weird because he's almost a bit superhuman.
Yeah.
But then he also doesn't know what a lot of things are.
Yeah.
So he has this vulnerability, which is he doesn't know he's never been on a plane, he doesn't know what an escalator is. But then he can throw a can of vegetables 50 yards or 100 yards and knock a guy out who's trying to mug you.
And they also do this thing of like Aboriginals have superpowers, and I have them. I am the Tom Cruise of this movie and have learned the ways of the other people.
I'm the bull whisperer.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I thought after that scene though, watching it last night, I'm like, he gets it to lay down, but then they can't drive anywhere.
That's what I said, Simon. By the way, that bull was drugged out of its mind for that scene.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that true?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't really want to be right in front of one of those. It's a water buffalo. I mean,
yeah.
I just want to say,
then they have horns.
When I was in Costa Rica with my brother and a cow blocked the road, I went out and did that. I did the hand.
You work?
No, we're yelling at the cow, waving my arms. Worked way better. Like, you can't be here. We have to pass. Worked way.
Yeah, that just told me this time because it just cuts from like the cow laying down to the next scene, and then suddenly they arrive. Like, how did you get around it? Did you drive over it then? I'm
like, they're pretty stuck their hours, which they wouldn't have been if they'd left it alone.
Right. It probably would have just moseyed on its way.
But then, on the one hand, he can do stuff like that. But then on the other hand, you have these jokes about, he's got his razor, and then when she comes out, he puts it, he doesn't even hide it, actually, which is kind of a bit stupid. And then he just gets his knife out, even though he's got his razor sticking out of his pants. I'm like, so that's kind of pointless. But, or he looks at a watch and then does the joke about, oh, yeah, it's about 2:20. But then on the other hand, he can do these exceptional things. So it's kind of a weird mix.
I agree. It really hit me this time that made me wonder, like, if there was a draft where he was completely full of shit and they hung on to some of those jokes.
Yeah.
and then there was the draft where he really could do this stuff, so she would properly swoon, because no matter what, they have to get him out of the where he was in the lake. They have to. She's there because he.
And to answer Jamie's point earlier, that's probably it, because she's going to leave, right? So there's got to be some reason to get him out of there as well with her. I mean, I guess he could have chased her and realized he was in love, but then that would have made him look weak back, especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
So
Right. I think it fits both of their personalities that she's the one that asked him.
Well, yeah, and I like watching this. I like the fact that she was like, "Fuck you, okay, I'll meet you at that rock in 5 hours." And when he was being sexist.
I do like that part too, and I also think it's incredibly realistic that it doesn't say anything about, oh, she can't do this because she's a woman. Yeah. To me, it says she doesn't know this area. Like, she doesn't know how to be around crocodiles and, insects and whatever. Like, that's why she's not successul.
Which to be fair, he's the same in New York.
Exactly.
Like talking to the prostitutes, and he's like, do you want to go dancing and all this? And they're like just laughing at him. Although, again, they don't have prostitutes where he comes from, really.
Yeah, I mean, they set it up as being this like cartoonishly, he talks about how he's only seen TV once before.
Yeah,
and I'm like, they have rabbit ears in Australia. He's seen TV. They have aerials.
That's one of the jokes that, I mean, Simon had referenced the jokes earlier. To me,
there's a lot of poor jokes, to be honest.
Well, there are, but I would argue that they are that way because I have seen this movie so many times, and because it's referenced so much. Like, how many times do people say that's a knife?
That's true.
It's just it's been just beat down.
Yeah.
But like, when I really think about it, like, the joke about I Love Lucy, that was funny. That was legitimately funny. When he turned on the TV, he's like, "Yep, that's what I saw."
Because kind of making a good point, as in like, TV's kind of shit. You should get outside and do stuff, really. So.
Well, but I mean, in the 80s, like, they were still running I Love Lucy all the time.
Yeah.
Like, in the States, at least. So that actually made sense to me. So I did laugh at that.
Yeah. I also liked her saying, where do you stand on nuclear armaments and stuff like that? And him just going, what does it matter out here, really? It's like, it's like two fleas arguing over who owns the dog.
That was a shockingly leveled and balanced. Like, I know people might take it, of course you have to have an opinion. Sort of. I was like, no, actually, I think that might be right.
Yeah. The fact that he doesn't care what day it is, or like when he was born, or he's just kind of living in the moment, which is, isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
When he does arrive in New York, you said that part kind of left you cold, and there's a few things that happen in New York when he gets there.
I still find it funny, but it's just a bit more eye rolling, I think. I mean, like,
it's very not just New York; it's New York through the lens of a 1980s film version of New York.
Yeah.
He's staying in the nicest hotel, but he's immediately going around the corner to an alleyway that has the classic pimp in it, and
well, New York is depicted as like, you're either in like the super wealthy, like, blowing coke part of the world, or it's just hookers and bars. Like, there's no in between.
It's weirdly like King Kong, because he goes to New York because he's in love with this blonde girl.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of doesn't destroy him, but the potential is there for it to happen. You know, but it takes him out of his natural environment, which kind of weakens him a bit, I think.
Yeah. I mean, he's able to occasionally. He does, as you said, he's kind of superhuman. He has a knife that he wields and whatnot, and shocks the guys with switchblades. And but the stuff that it definitely has some things of race and class that don't necessarily translate particularly well. I think people younger than us who do not remember how for
I was waiting for them to say fag, and they didn't let me down.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, it's an
got to
80s.
get in there in an 80s film. Got to say that
requirement. The MPAA was like, where's your... But it was an interesting thing because it's so unfiltered from this period of really speaking to the panic about people who are transgender, which is really boiling down to, but what if I accidentally fall for someone who's transgender?
It's almost like being scared of like black people, isn't it? It's the same kind of similar thing. It's like, except he isn't, because actually he lives with them. So he's in fact, very like, well, what tribe are you from, mate? And it's like, what do you mean tribe? And it's like, well, you're doing pretty well for yourself only driving this car and stuff. So, so that he's comfortable with, but he obviously has no experience of, transgender or transvestites at the time, if you prefer that, I suppose. But yeah.
Well, I mean, even at the time, I remember being just horrified that he's grabbing the crotches of like 2 or 3 different people. I don't even remember, but it was just like, wow, you went there. You went there.
Yeah. I mean, it could easily, like now, obviously, but like even at the time, it could easily be like, horrible, almost played, seriously, like horribly. But they obviously play it for laughs with the, the old guy kind of saying, well, he's Australian. Well, I'll have to go there, I'll have to visit. But I mean, like it's kind of like, it's not cool.
The other thing that I think dates this is there's a scene in the daytime party where he stumbles onto the guy who's doing lines of coke in the break room,
which always has a cut out when they showed on BBC. They always cut that bit out.
Did they really? Well, so I did notice, and I remember this from watching it when I was a kid, how downplayed that was. Like he asks her about it later, and she says, "Oh, it's cocaine. You use it to get a little buzz." I'm like, well, yeah, because everyone making this movie was probably doing coke. Like they wanted to like. Hey, there's nothing wrong with it. That's what everyone does.
The entire sequel about drug dealers being bad people. So
they probably got talked to or something. I don't know. The studio got involved. Nancy Reagan probably got involved. I don't know.
Well, it's also weirdly though, like she's like that, which kind of makes her look like a bit like, okay, I guess she does drugs. But then he's like, well, why would you need to do that? Why don't you just talk to your friends? Like same as psychiatry, is like just talk to your friends. So there's a lot of kind of homespun wisdom, which I think is why this made so much money, because it's almost like the cowboy motif, which by this point it obviously kind of died out mainly in America, apart from the odd person in Texas. But it's just, but this is the cowboy. This is the real cowboy. And this is him saying, you don't need drugs. You don't need to be doing this. Although, he's obviously drunk a lot. So looking at it now, it's
drunk
like,
a lot.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, they by this point, of course, it's the Australia, and maybe that was the appeal of Australia to the U.S. Tourist market in the 80s. It got really sold as being this kind of unclosed frontier of, it might be surrounded on all the shoreline of Australia, but there's fuck all out there. And we all knew there were ranches the size of Texas. You always heard that there's ranches the size of Texas in Australia. I would still like to go there. I mean, to be totally candid, but it definitely is. I was thinking about like the.
Well, we also had in England, like you guys talk about this kind of like breaking Australia. Mm-hmm. We also had around this time in England a couple of Australian soap operas started, like Home and Away and Neighbours, which were on different channels, but they were actually shown at lunchtime and then repeated about 4 p.m. And everybody in my school, when I was at high school, would go home and watch the 4 p.m. one. Yeah. And sometimes I'd actually cycle home for lunch and watch it twice in a day. So it was like, so suddenly Australia was like really cool. And like, and out of those shows, Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue became pop stars
Yeah.
for a while. And Kylie Minogue's kind of still going now. Jason Donovan died off a bit. But like, so Australia was suddenly like really cool from about this time, around this time. Yeah. And I think this just hit at exactly the same time as they did. It all came together.
Yeah. Kylie Minogue has a new album coming out in September, if anyone's curious. Not that I keep track.
Right.
But she's got a thong as well.
Yeah. It's positive. It's just interesting to see kind of this kind of version of masculinity, and part of it, of course, there's this age gap between the actors and all this that is not ever really acknowledged. But one of the things that watching Paul Hogan now, and I don't mean in 2023, but in this movie, as I'm watching him, he looks now to me like the dudes that, if you go to Galveston, the dudes who decide their life is going to be living on the beach.
Their job is beach.
Their job is beach, and you just go, oh my God, dude, you need some 50 SPF. Like
it's the same in Hawaii. Like all the white people that live there, that have chosen to live there, look terrible. Yeah. They're like, I mean, their skin looks like Paul Hogan's does. It's just, tanned and like leathery, and their hair's all fried because they spend all the time in the ocean.
Well, it's funny how he, this is still like early enough that this was almost like a Clint Eastwood type version of masculinity, where you can kind of we look at it now and like kind of say it looks like crap, but at the time, he was kind of a stud.
Well, he's like 0% body fat. He's not a funny looking guy. It's just I the whole time I was looking at him, I was like, your dermatologist must love you. You must get them so much money.
I also noticed, like, in a couple of shots, I mean, you see this with a lot of actors like Al Pacino, but he had very big heels on.
Oh,
so he's actually quite short. Or Linda Kowalski's
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed she had like kitten heels on for most of her New York scenes, so that's probably why.
Yeah. So do you think he was about our age when he made this?
Yeah.
So so Ryan had to tell me their age difference, but it never bothered me watching this because for some reason, like we had said earlier, I thought she was in her 30s. And to me, it just looked like he had a weathered face from being outside. So I thought he was like younger than he looked, but apparently no, he was just that old.
Well, it's also,
so I don't know. It never.
He's so alien as well, isn't he? I think compared to most leading men with an age difference, I think because he is so weird and different.
Yeah,
it's almost like it kind of works a little bit. Because it is like, total opposites attract, kind of,
Yeah, and I think that's definitely part of the appeal of the setup. There's some other people who are in the film as well. There's his buddy Wally. His buddy.
It's a great performance, I think, from that. Actually,
I think
I love how he's like choosing his words very carefully about like they're basically just lying, but but he's like, yes, he's around somewhere. And then we're like going, did you did you? And he goes, you are, or have you got wind or something?
He also co-stars MVP of the 80s, Reginald Bell Johnson.
Yes. Yeah. Probably the most famous person in this movie.
Yeah.
In his own way. I mean, this guy blew up. I mean, already from, being in movies, and then he, with the Family Matters sitcom and whatnot, it just absolutely an enormous figure to the point now where he's been in commercials as TV dad. Because you're not going to listen to your real dad.
See, it's too late now, but if somebody with half a brain had done it, I think about 10 years ago, they should have done a final Die Hard, get John McClane in Japan being honored by Yakatomi for what he did in the 80s, have Al go with him for old time's sake, and then the shit kicks off. There you go. That
Oh,
would have been a great final
that's
Die
way better than anything they did in
I
this.
like it. I like it.
Hard.
But yeah, I find that it's a movie at this point that I think has the core of it holds up because the core of it is borrowing from other good things. And I think to your point too about it being kind of bifurcated, it kind of stitches the first movie and the sequel into one movie by
Yeah.
doing the two different locations. You get
It's got a distinct cut down the middle, doesn't it?
I mean,
Yeah.
almost exact. Jamie paused the movie when they got on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Because I was curious.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember my dad always saying as well when we used to watch it, he used to go, yeah, it's not as good now. As soon as they get on the plane. Because another selling point we kind of forget now because we're so used to it is I think in the first half, the landscape.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
I think the landscape and the music do an awful lot of heavy lifting. That we
I always want to
forget
go
about.
to that lake where they're swimming in the, and he says, "Oh, there's no crocodiles here." I'm like, "Okay, that looks inviting."
Yeah. Although I was watching it yesterday, and I'm like, I was pretty sure she was still wearing a swimsuit. I'm like, is he naked? Is he supposed to be naked?
Nah, probably not.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
But yeah,
And weathered old bum hanging out of the water.
it has portions that definitely kind of aged like cottage cheese in the sun, but I do think it's interesting to go back and see something sometimes just to see kind of how we felt about so many things at the time. But I really, I kind of want to touch base on some movies that did leave these major cultural impacts. I mean, the Crocodile Dundee was so massive they had to rush a sequel into production.
I think it was #1 in America for something like 10 weeks.
Yeah,
which I can't even imagine a film doing that now. But maybe
Barbie's working on it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I don't know if it'll make it 10 weeks, but
but I mean, it's kind of like back in those days. This was probably still in the top 5 films for the next year because it just made so much money. It's like Jurassic Park, it just kind of keeps going and going and going, and they don't pull it out of theaters either,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I'm in a mad dash to go see the sequel. Or the third. The third one I'm a little curious about just because
I'm curious because I've never seen it. I would at least try to start watching it.
Yeah.
I watched it once and I remember thinking
once.
it wasn't offensive. It was just like kind of like
why?
Way too little, way too late,
Yeah.
It's like what's the point?
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the ending for a little bit.
I love the ending. I love the ending.
I do too. I'll give it that. When I was a kid, it's so charming and it's so very 80s and it's so very rom-com.
And it's kind of stupid. It's kind of stupid funny.
So, yes. But I mean, and it's those two things because like if you think of like New York in the real world, if you have like sardine packed people in New York and these two assholes are wanting to like run to each other like through everyone else and this guy is like stomping on people's heads, someone's gonna get killed. But this is a movie and so everyone is on board with it. Everyone gives a shit about their relationship, which would never happen in real life. And so I find is absolutely charming.
I totally agree with you because what made me laugh last night was actually him standing on their heads.
Yes.
I've never really noticed before.
Oh, yeah. He stomps on there.
I'm like...
With his boots. He's got boots on.
Yeah, they're not even really holding him up. He's just kind of walking.
I mean, I really wonder how they did that without injuring people.
I think there's a plank we can't see. I get the feeling. There's a hidden plank. Okay. I think he's just going along with that. But
yeah, when you see his feet, he's probably holding, a cable or rope or something above everybody. But I think it's a great way to wrap the movie. It does such a good job of pulling all the threads together of her, the walkabout, threat and the
touch of her pulling her shoes off in the middle.
the mad
Yeah.
dash, like down the whatever.
There's actually a lot of tension there.
Yeah. And he's talked about how much he likes New Yorkers numerous times. And so, you have this chance for like the New Yorkers to play a part. New York plays a part suddenly as a character, kind of, getting them pulled back together. But
yeah, the two guys playing broken telephone in the middle of that scene.
Everyone getting more involved. I remember the huge round of applause they got when I saw it in the theater the first time, when he stood up on everybody and everyone was like cheering and clapping, back when people did that in theaters, when it wasn't Captain America throwing a hammer. But yeah, it got a huge audience response, and that's the feeling people left with when they walked out of the theater, that said, they went to their friends and said, you gotta see the Crocodile Dundee.
Those crazy Australians.
Yeah, it's so charming. And they're not wrong. I mean, it definitely has its charm. It definitely does a lot of things very, very well.
I did watch something which I got to tell you before I forget last night. So I was looking up, obviously there's 2 sequels, but there's also, I don't know if you remember from 2018, a Super Bowl trailer, which is like basically, it starts off with Chris Hemsworth and Danny McBride. And Danny McBride, it starts off almost like it's a pretend film. And I think at the time, I remember thinking they had made another sequel. And he's like, I'm the son of Crocodile Dundee and I'm looking for my dad. And then Chris Hemsworth is taking him around restaurants and stuff and, vineyards. And then finally, Danny McBride goes, this isn't a film, is it? And he goes, no, it's an advert for like Australia, Danny. And then he goes like, but you are the best Crocodile Dundee I've ever seen. And then it just cuts to Paul Hogan, like standing at the bar going, like scowling. And I was like, it's actually pretty good.
I'm going to have to look that up.
No, I remember the run up to that coming out. They made it sound like they really were going to show this trailer for this movie they'd made in secret.
And I actually kind of I remember being a bit disappointed when I realized it was just a big setup. So
I think they realized that was a mistake in hindsight.
Yeah.
Like, people were like, oh, a new Crocodile Dundee with these two? Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Watch that. And they're like, no movie, just a commercial. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Because
Sure.
you could have brought Paul Hogan back and had him in the second half of the film and stuff. And have him teach him and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so Linda Kozlowski and he split up, as we were saying at the beginning, about 10 years ago. Apparently, I think she ran off with a younger dude. Like, she met like on a European vacation or something.
I think it was amicable from what I read, though, which I kind of like.
Oh, no, it was not. It was all of
wasn't?
the Australian press as being a very ugly divorce.
Oh. So she's obviously lying in the interview I read last night.
Well, what I heard was eventually they figured out they were screwing up their kid, and so they were like, okay, whatever differences we have to not air this in the press. And so it all tamped down after that. But
is their kid not an adult now?
He is, but
be.
He was already, apparently, I don't want to get too much into their family business, but he was apparently having some issues already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My apologies.
I know Paul Hogan is, he tried a few other films after this, like Lightning Jack, I remember, where he played an actual cowboy, like comedy movie, and there was like almost an angel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think he gets killed at the start as a burglar, but then he comes back to help somebody. But none of them kind of worked really. Outside of Crocodile Dundee, really. I did see one a few years ago, which was like, I guess, an Aussie film it made, which again is probably like, would be frowned on horribly now. But it kind of made me laugh at the time. This was about 10 years, 15 years ago, where he and his best mate in Australia pretend they're gay because they get money from the government. So they have to like keep this going. And it was a bit like the Birdcage, but obviously Australian and a lot more offensive. But I remember it did make me chuckle a couple of times,
Yeah, I honestly have no concept of his filmography post Crocodile Dundee 3. But I think he missed a beat probably by not trying to do a TV show at some point.
Yeah.
I think he would have worked very well as like sitcom dad or sitcom president or sitcom something.
Yeah, something like Home Improvement type thing.
Yeah, I think he could have done really well with that. But he clearly is fine. He has billions of dollars from being Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely both fun and interesting to go back to see this one again. It had been quite a while. But I'm going to wrap it up. Do you guys have any final thoughts on the Crocodile Dundee?
No, I kind of agree with Jamie, actually. I feel like, I loved this film when I was kind of a kid. And I still love parts of it. I still totally love the last 10 minutes, a lot of individual moments. But yeah, you watch it now and you're like, yeah, it's definitely dated and definitely a bit clunky, a bit kind of rustier than you remember. But I think the charm of the leads definitely just carries the whole thing through. It kind of forces the whole thing through successfully. Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's yep. all those things.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to come back at this and all you can see is the negative stuff if that's the mindset you want to hit it with. I did appreciate the mechanics of it. I did think some parts were funnier than they needed to be. But I don't know when the next time I'm not going to like put up a Crocodile Dundee poster at this point. But who knows, Jamie? We're in the living room.
I do need to tanning. I do need to give a quick shout out because we didn't talk about it about the kangaroo shooting the hunters.
Yes,
which was kind of so stupid, but it's kind of great.
It was so stupid, but I still love that part.
I mean, I just kind of like.
The 11-year-old in me was just cheering on that little
it literally
dead kangaroo
response when I saw it the first time. Huge crowd response.
I mean, even last night, I kind of I rationalized it to myself by saying, well, the guys in the trucks are very drunk.
Well, it's dark. They can't see very well.
Yeah. But they do go like, shit, that kangaroo's got an automatic weapon or something. Makes no sense, but so yeah. And then I love how Paul Hogan just throws it very unceremoniously away after they've gone. It's like he doesn't really give a shit either. He's just trying to.
He saved the rest of the kangaroos.
That's true. But it's kind of cool how he kind of went. Well, what do you want me to do about it? I like it's kind of like almost like an Indiana Jones thing where he's made to kind of grow some morals. She helps him grow some morals a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. It's a good character growth moment.
Yeah.
All right. Well, y'all, I don't know what we're doing next, but Simon, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back soon with more Signal Watch, more Simon, more Jamie.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.